Oh, okay. Here we go. Hi, I'm Bethany Taylor, and this video is for the moms group. Just a quick introduction. My husband Joshua and I are both from Presque Isle and now live down in the Lewiston, Wales area of Maine. So Carly was kind enough to invite me to be a part of this adoption moms panel. And just to let you know, I am sitting in my car, flying by the seat of my pants this morning to get this video uploaded to you. So maybe that's a brief introduction to me. I'm a busy mom with 5 adopted kids, going back to school full time. And so I'm actually sitting in the parking lot of the University of New England before my chemistry class, getting this video to you. So all of you who are racing out the door this morning can feel like you're in good company, I guess, because we're all just trying to do our best that we can. And so no judgy thoughts of anyone here as we try to keep it all together, right? So you don't have to be a perfect mom to be an adoptive mom. So let's get that out of the way, right? So I'm just going through the questions that Carly gave me here. So I don't know if she's going to stop and start this as the other moms go through the panel that you guys have there this morning. But so I have 5 kids. They range in age from age 6 to 18, all through adoption. Our oldest actually came to us through a disruption. She was adopted from Ethiopia by another family and then became part of our family in, January of 2012. So she's been with us for 4 years. She's 18. Her name is Medi. And then we have Enoch and Tegist. Enoch is 13. He'll be 14 next month. And Tegist is 12. They're both in 7th grade. And they were the first children that we adopted in, they came home at ages 6 and 5 in January of 2009 from Ethiopia. Our youngest 2 are Justice and Rebecca, and they came into our family in September of 2010, also from Ethiopia. And we actually met Justice in the orphanage when we were in Ethiopia adopting Enoch and Tegist, and kind of knew at that point that if he was still available for adoption that we would want to go back to bring him into our family. So he was almost 5 when we were there in January of 2009, and he was 6.5 by the time we brought him home in September of 2010. In the process of us filling out paperwork and pursuing his adoption, our youngest daughter, Rebecca, who is now age 6, but was 5 months old when she came onto the waiting children's list with our adoption agency. We saw her photo, and it was just kind of one of those, we knew that she was our daughter. And so she was about 10 months old when we brought her home. So that's kind of a quick introduction to who we are. And each of our kids, they came through international adoption / domestic care for our oldest. So the second question was how adoption became part of our story. Joshua and I have been married since July of 2003 and always knew that we wanted children. And we also really knew that we wanted adoption to be a part of our family story. We had both done work in orphanages in foreign countries. Joshua had been to China a couple times, and I had actually spent a summer in Romania and had been able to work in an orphanage. I guess we kind of volunteered in a Romanian orphanage. So it it was on both of our hearts to have adoption as part of our story, and specifically international adoption, because we knew the need. But we didn't know that it would be our whole story or our whole family building plan. So when we decided to start our family shortly after getting married, and I was unable to get pregnant, it through some heartache of not being able to biologically have children, but also, I guess, through the grace of God, knowing that He had previously put this in our hearts, we decided to eventually pursue adoption. And so I think I'm just trying to, it was kind of time building, I think, like to wrestle with how that looked and what that looked like. But eventually God really made it clear that that was His plan for us. Biggest fear, well, I guess also part of our story was, and I think part of what a lot of people want to know is, how do you decide where to adopt from, and how do you decide what country, what age, and I guess we kind of started out with, well, don't people just adopt infants? Because that's how you start families. And so we originally, when we kind of settled on Ethiopia being a place that we qualified for, and we knew travel-wise we could take that time, we just thought, oh, we're young, we'll adopt a baby. And it kind of quickly became apparent to us that, the 150 million orphans that you hear about are not all healthy infants under 12 months old from, mothers who just don't want them. And so I think for us, we knew that from our work in orphanages, but our heart really opened up to children who are waiting. We kind of, I guess I say, like, we came to the conclusion that why would we wait when there were children waiting? And so generally in adoption, you find that there's a long waiting list, like families waiting to be matched with children because they have very specific requests. I want a girl under 2, or I want a boy under 3, or I just want a healthy infant under 12 months. And so when God had really kind of opened up our hearts to adoption, I think through a process we came to the place of being open to a number of special needs and a number of ages and siblings. And so our first request was actually siblings under 8, and we were matched to Enoch and to Gist within 3 hours of us turning in our application. And so that's something that I always encourage people to consider. Like, there are millions of children waiting for families, and those are the children that are older or with siblings, or with medical needs. And so that really influenced our decision. So I know in the interest of time, I want to kind of skim through some of the questions and see. Probably the biggest fear was finances at first. Like, how were we going to fund this? And our first adoption, we didn't have kids, and so I was working, and we basically channeled everything I made into our adoption, while also doing fundraising. The second adoption that we began 12 months after bringing our first 2 home for justice, and then also adding in Rebecca, we had no money. We literally had like the $200 that we needed to apply. But God provided in miraculous ways. In every step, every time a payment came due, every need to even the point of we flew to Ethiopia in July to attend court for Justice and Rebecca, and we were a family of 4 at that point, Josh and Enoch and Tegist and I, and we had one car, a Dodge Neon. So it was not going to fit our expanding family that was going to be 6, and we were going to be flying back to bring these children home in about 6 to 8 weeks, and we had no money to really go out and purchase a car. And in the time that we came home and before we returned to Ethiopia to bring Justice and Rebecca home, someone gave us the money to purchase a van. And it was just a complete testimony of God's grace to us and his favor to us and his love for these kids that we were bringing home. So it was a huge fear, a huge worry, but God continued to provide and show himself faithful. I'm going to skip through a couple and just kind of combine this. How has adjustment into regular life gone? What's been the biggest struggle? And I've heard that adoption always comes from loss. And that's true. These aren't, well, I think adoption stems from you have some kids that are removed from families because the families are not great families. You also have families who intentionally, out of love and care for their children, place their children for adoption because either a loss of a parent, sickness, death, all of those things, or you have children coming from both parents dying. And I think in international adoption, we tend to go to these countries and think these children's lives are going to be so much better now that they're here in America in a family. But I think it's important to stop and think, like, what would happen if I'm assuming everybody in the moms group has children, but what if you and your husband died and then somebody who came and spoke a different language brought your children to their country to give them a family out of love, but expected them to just be grateful and thankful for them rescuing them? I think really puts it into perspective when we think about the adjustment that these kids have to go through. And they're not always grateful, and they're not always happy that happened. And so it needs to shape the way that we think about adoption, especially for older kids, and how we care and parent for them, because we're parenting from loss in these kids' lives, and they're not going to always be grateful, and they're not always going to be thankful. I mean, honestly, which are, children who are biologically brought into our families are not always grateful either. So, but I think there's this expectation put on adopted children that they should be, and that's the farthest from the truth. And I think that we also tend to think that there will be this automatic love for these children, and that's not always the case either. And so that's difficult. So I think the adjustment, we need to just have some good expectations and just be aware that there is a lot of hurt, and it's difficult. It's straining. Being a mom in any circumstances is difficult. There are a lot of expectations, it's just a little different for adopted parents. So I'm trying to think. I know there are a lot of other people there speaking to you this morning, but I think it's also important when we think about adoption to think about the joy, and there is huge joy in adoption, and you get to have a front row seat to a redemption story that you wouldn't otherwise see. And it's amazing. It's amazing every day to see that God is redeeming brokenness and loss and trauma, and through, I guess we see that, like, we see this in our children's lives as we see him at work in their lives, but also he's redeeming sinful parts of my own heart, and opening up my own heart to things. So I think it's a huge joy. It's a huge joy to see and be witness to the amazing things that God does in our children's lives. So I also want to just kind of speak to the different types of ways I think that we all need to be involved in adoption and in caring for orphans, and that can look different, and take different shapes and forms. And so maybe you're not feeling called to bring a child permanently into your family, but another way that our family has been a part of caring for children is through hosting orphan children, and bringing. One December we brought a 4-year-old special needs girl from Latvia into our family, and really just we worked while she was in trying to connect her with an adoptive family, and just having her here for a month, connecting with other families. She is now in an amazing family, thriving. And so that can be one way that we work with and show love to orphan children. Another summer we hosted 2 boys from the Ukraine, and while they were not interested in being adopted, they got to experience what life in a family and in a loving family looked like. So that was also a huge blessing to our family, and I think to these boys. And that was 2 summers ago, and we still are in contact with them through social media. So kind of reaching my time max here. So I would, if anybody has questions, I'm always available to talk with you guys, or I'd love to talk on the phone or email any questions that you guys might have. I wish I could be there with you this morning, but I want you to know that adoption is, it's a blessing, and it's difficult, but it's also doable. And so I hope that this is just kind of giving you a small insight into that, and feel free to contact me if you guys have any other questions. Thanks for letting me be a part of your morning. Take care. Bye.